It's 2:40 in the morning, and you are the most awake person in the state, whether you like it or not. In front of you, a black scope freckled with little green data blocks, each one a metal tube full of people who have no idea you exist. Behind you, a room that smells like burnt coffee and floor wax and the specific tension of somewhere that is never, ever allowed to be empty. You have not blinked in a while. Somewhere over the water, two of those data blocks are drifting toward the same altitude, and the only thing standing between them and the front page is you, a headset, and a voice you have trained to stay flat no matter what your heart is doing. This is the job. Nobody claps. Nobody ever will. That's kind of the point. 1. 6 figures and no degree. Here's how they sell it to you. And to be fair, the pitch is a good one. You don't need a 4-year degree. You will out-earn most of your friends who spent $120,000 on theirs. Federal data puts the median controller wage north of $140,000, and the people at the busy facilities, stacking overtime, clear well past $200,000. You can retire in your early 50s with a pension, while everyone your age is squinting at a 401k balance and doing quiet math about whether they'll ever stop. On paper, it is one of the last jobs in America where a regular person without connections or a diploma can walk into real money. You just have to get in, and getting in is a filter designed by someone who apparently hates you. You have to be hired before you turn 31 because they want a full career out of you before the wall. You take an aptitude test that measures things you didn't know were skills. Holding 6 moving objects in your head while someone talks in your ear and a 7th object appears. You pass a medical, a background check, a security clearance that takes months. And then you wait, sometimes for a year, refreshing a government portal that was clearly built during a different presidency. The demand is not the problem. Roughly 200,000 people have applied over the last few years. The agency is still thousands of controllers short. Sit with that for a second. A line out the door, and the tower's still half empty. It should tell you something that the bottleneck isn't people wanting in, it's surviving what comes next. 2. Oklahoma City. They send you to Oklahoma City? Everybody goes to Oklahoma City. The FAA Academy sits at the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center, and it is where the dream either becomes a career or becomes a story you tell at parties for the rest of your life. You move to a city you did not choose, on trainee pay that would embarrass the salary they dangled in the recruiting brochure, and you spend months learning to run traffic in a simulator that does not care about your feelings, your rent, or the fact that you uprooted your whole life to be there. Then a lot of you don't make it. That's not pessimism, it's the design. A retired controller described the odds without flinching. Maybe a third to half get through Oklahoma. The washout rate runs around 30%, and for some classes it's worse. People who were the sharpest person in every room they'd ever been in discover there is a specific kind of sharp this job requires, and they don't have it. And there is no essay you can write to argue your way back in. If you survive the academy, you have not made it. You've earned the right to keep being tested. You get assigned to a facility, and whether that's a sleepy tower in a small city or one of the busiest chunks of airspace on Earth is a lottery you don't get to win or lose on merit. Then you spend another 1 to 4 years certifying on live traffic, plugged in next to a veteran who can pull the headset out of your hand the instant you start to sync. People wash out here too, years in, after already passing everything, on the last hill. By the time you're finally alone on a scope with nobody's hand near your plug, you have survived a gauntlet most people never even see the entrance to. You will not feel triumphant. You'll feel like you're finally allowed to start. 3. Plugging in. Here's what the work actually is, once nobody's holding your plug. You walk in, you get a briefing, you slide into a chair still warm from the person you're relieving, and you take a verbal handoff of a live situation at speed. Who's where? Who's climbing? Who's about to be a problem? Then you put on the headset, key up, and become a different person. Your voice drops into a register with no weather in it. Not calm exactly. Calm is a feeling. This is a decision you make with your throat, over and over, for hours. The whole job is separation. Keep the metal apart. 3 miles laterally, 1,000 feet vertically, that's the fence, and your entire nervous system is bent toward maintaining it while 10, 15, 20 aircraft ask you for things at once. Higher, faster, direct, lower. A turn around that weather. You're not really talking to planes. You're running a real-time optimization problem out loud in a clipped dialect of headings and flight levels, where unable is a complete sentence and there is no polite version of a mistake. And you get good at it. Weirdly, unnervingly good. You develop a thing veterans just call the picture. A running 3D model of your airspace that lives behind your eyes, updating faster than you could describe it. You can eyeball two targets and know, without doing arithmetic, that they merge in 90 seconds and one of them has to move now. You spin 4 airplanes into a stack over a fix and land them in an order you decided before they even checked in. Nobody handed you that on a certificate. You built it, rep by rep, on a scope, at 2 a.m., while the rest of the country slept through the thing you were quietly preventing. You work a position for a stretch, then you plug out for a break, because the human brain cannot hold the picture indefinitely and everyone knows it. You get 20 minutes to be a normal mammal. Microwave something, stare at a wall, remember you have a family. Then you plug back in and the picture snaps back on like a light you never really turned off. Most nights nothing happens. That's the job done right. You go home having authored a masterpiece of nothing, and there is no one on earth you can explain that to. 4. The rattler. Now let's talk about when you sleep, because the answer is not on a schedule any human body was built for. The famous one is called the 2-2-1, and controllers have a warmer name for it, the rattler, because it turns around and bites. You work 2 evening shifts, then 2 day shifts, then swing straight into a midnight, with as little as 8 or 9 hours between clocking out and clocking back in. You don't sleep so much as nap in the wrong direction, over and over, sprinting through a week's worth of shifts in 4 days. People do it on purpose. It buys a long weekend on the other end, and after the week you've had, you'll trade almost anything for 3 days where nobody keys up in your ear. Then the shutdowns and the staffing holes pile mandatory overtime on top. 6-day weeks, 60-hour weeks, a day off that gets a phone call. You are being paid time and a half to keep doing the most attention-hungry job in the country, while running a sleep debt you will never actually pay down. The government studied its own people on this, and the numbers are grim. Controllers averaged under 6 hours of sleep across the work week and barely 3 before a midnight shift. That's not a tired workforce. That's a workforce operating at the cognitive level science politely files under impaired, directing your descent into a major airport. The cruelest part isn't the shift, it's the drive home from the midnight. Sun coming up, radio loud, window down, doing 40 and a 50 because your reaction time is shot and you know it. You just kept a few hundred strangers alive all night. Now you're the most dangerous thing on the interstate, trying to make it to your own bed. 5. The money is real, so is the bill. Let's be honest about the paycheck, because it's the thing that keeps a lot of people in the chair. The money is not a myth. Stack base pay with the night differential, the Sunday premium, and a wall of overtime, and a controller at a busy facility genuinely clears numbers that most professionals with graduate degrees never see. The top slice of the workforce pulls past $210,000 a year. Some controllers work so much overtime they slam into the federal pay cap, a ceiling around $228,000, and then keep working, for free, because the traffic doesn't care that the government stopped counting. But look closely at how that money gets made. It isn't a salary, it's a conversion rate. You are turning your weekends, your sleep, your kids' bedtime, your presence at the dinner table, and a non-trivial chunk of your long-term health into dollars at a fixed exchange of time and a half. The number is high because the price is high. Nobody pays you 200 grand to be relaxed. And the money has a way of quietly trapping you. You buy the house that fits the overtime income. The lifestyle calibrates to 60-hour weeks, and now the overtime isn't extra, it's the mortgage, and you can't dial it back without dismantling a life you built assuming it would always be there. You got rich by a specific American method. You sold your future self, in installments, at a premium. So yes, you make real money. You just don't get to be around for much of the life it's supposedly buying. 6. What you do again. It would be dishonest to make this all bleak, because if it were, nobody good would stay, and the good ones mostly do. So here's the part the disillusionment has to push against. You are, genuinely, one of a few thousand people on the continent who can do this thing. Not good at your job in the LinkedIn sense, good at a task that most competent, intelligent, hard-working adults would physically fail at inside of 10 minutes. There's a specific dignity in that, and it doesn't wash out. On a busy push, when the traffic is relentless, and you're moving airplanes like you're conducting something, there's a flow state in there that people chase their whole lives in hobbies and never find at work. You find it on a Tuesday, mid-shift, and then you go get a sandwich. Then there's the room. Nobody outside it will ever fully get what you do, which means the only people who understand your life are the ones sitting next to you at 3 a.m. That builds a particular kind of loyalty, dark-humored, unsentimental, absolutely reliable. These are people who have watched you at your sharpest and your most fried and never once flinched or told anyone. You will make friends in that room you'd take a bullet for and would rather die than say so out loud. And the exit is real. The wall at 56 sounds like a threat, but flip it over. You can walk at 50, or even earlier, with a federal pension and a supplement, while your college-educated friends are still 10 or 15 years from the finish line, refreshing a retirement calculator that keeps moving the date. You spent your body early and got bought out early. Plenty of controllers, asked straight up whether they'd do it again, say yes without much hesitation. And they're not lying, and they're not brainwashed. The math for them worked. That's the trap and the gift in the same envelope. It really is worth it to a lot of people, which is exactly why it costs so much when it goes wrong. 7. The deal. Because sometimes it goes wrong, and you don't get to unknow that. Every controller carries a near miss they don't talk about. The day 2 targets got closer than the fence allows, the call they made half a second before it would have been a different call. The cold flush afterward while your voice stays flat, because there are still 15 other airplanes who need you to be fine. You learn that nothing happened and something almost happened feel identical in the body. You just file it and key up again. And then there's the one nobody in the profession can file away. On January 29, 2025, over the Potomac, an American Eagle regional jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided on approach to Reagan National. 67 people died. It was the deadliest crash on American soil in more than 2 decades. In the tower that night, one controller was working a combined position: the helicopter traffic and the airline traffic, 2 jobs that are normally split between 2 people, folded onto one set of shoulders because there weren't enough bodies in the building. The investigation is still working through what happened and why, and it would be wrong to pin a tragedy on any one person while that's ongoing. But every controller in the country understood the shape of it instantly because they've all worked that understaffed shift. They've all been the one person doing the job of 2, being told it's fine, hoping it stays fine. That's the deal you actually signed, not the pay. The pay is the anesthetic. The deal is that you agree to be the last line, every shift, in a system that keeps quietly betting your attention against a shortage it refuses to fix. And on the worst nights, the house wins, and 67 families find out what you already knew. You go back in the next day, there isn't anyone else. 8. Working for free. And then, as if to prove the point, the country stops paying you and asks you to keep the planes apart anyway. In the fall of 2025, the government shut down for 43 days, the longest in history, and roughly 13,000 controllers were ordered to keep working without a paycheck. Not reduced, 0. You are managing 50,000 daily flights, running the same overtime, carrying the same liability, and your direct deposit is a flat line. Some controllers picked up second jobs between shifts. Some handed out flyers to passengers at the airport, quietly begging travelers to call Congress so they could get paid to prevent those same travelers from dying. Officials called them patriots, which is the word the system reaches for right before it asks you to eat another loss. If you'd been through the 2019 shutdown, you knew the sequel to the promise of prompt back pay. Last time, some controllers weren't made whole for months after it ended. One didn't see all the money owed until May. So you show up, unpaid, running the Rattler, 1 lapse away from the worst day of someone's life, and you do it because walking out isn't a protest, it's a body count. That's the thing the recruiting brochure never mentions. You will love parts of this job with your whole chest. You will be prouder of your worst days than most people are of their best. And the system that relies on you completely will, when it comes down to it, treat your paycheck as optional and your attention as infinite. You watch the retirement countdown like a hostage watching a clock. 56 is the wall, but the number you're really counting toward is the day the math finally says now, the day you can hang up the headset, sleep in the correct direction, and let the picture, at long last, go dark. You stay because you're good at it, because the money's real, because the people beside you are family, and because someone has to. Those are all true. So is the fact that it's slowly eating you. Nobody makes you pick. So that's your life. The most important job nobody thanks you for, paid in money you're too tired to spend, keeping strangers alive on a schedule designed by a snake. You didn't fail at the American dream. You did the opposite. You caught it, held it 3 miles from the next one, and got told to work the weekend. Subscribe for more American life, described out loud by someone who's clearly not sleeping either.